serve as co-host today for the Association of Justice and Treatment Professionals and the International Association of Treatment Court Professionals annual conference. I've been a member of the International Association for over a decade, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Assistant Deputy Attorney General Jeremy Akerstream, who has more than 20 years of criminal law experience, beginning as defense counsel and then serving as public prosecution service in all levels of the Manitoba courts. Attorney Akerstream is an active supporter of drug treatment courts nationally and now serves as the chair of the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals. And as you know, their goal is to raise public awareness and impact public policy to reflect the necessity of drug treatment courts. Also, in my search of the internet, I learned Attorney Akerstream is also an ardent supporter of the Jazz Winnipeg organization. Good morning, Attorney Akerstream.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dennis. Greatly appreciated. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I come to you from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people, and then the homeland of the Métis people. We are very pleased to be here today, both as a representative of the government of Manitoba, as well as a member of the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals. And special thanks to Dennis for his extra research. I am, in fact, also chair of the board of directors of Jazz Winnipeg and have been for the last several years. So I was just told just before I started that I was going to give a balanced presentation. I look forward to that. But certainly what I want to do is give you just a few things. Number one is we're going to give you a little bit of a history of the drug treatment court here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our challenges going forward, some of the lessons that we've learned, and some of the challenges that we have going forward. And of course, at any point, if you have a question or concern, please feel free to ask. I may not have an answer, or at least not an accurate one. It's always hard to know. Anyway, as you've heard, I'm now the Assistant Deputy Attorney General for the province of Manitoba. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Manitoba. I'll skip over the weather and just tell you that Manitoba is a province right in the center of Canada, just a little bit north of North Dakota, for those of you who are from the United States. And we have about 1.35 million people in our province. What's significant for us is that not only do we have 1.35 million people, but about 21 to 22% are Indigenous. Unfortunately, I can tell you as Justice Minister, it's a very difficult, it's a part of the Justice Ministry, it's a very difficult position to be in, but approximately 70% of our incarcerated population are Indigenous. So you can see that's over 3.5 times the general population number. And we don't keep specific stats, but we think between 80 and 90% of our justice participants, if you want to use that word, are also Indigenous. I can tell you, because recently we've had the discussions with respect to devolution of family services, that with respect to the apprehension of children under the Child and Family Services Act, 88% are Indigenous. So when we're speaking from Manitoba, when I'm speaking to you from Manitoba, the idea of reconciliation is paramount for us at this time. And it's clear, very clear, as you've heard from those numbers, that we have to take some significant steps to start to alleviate the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our justice system. So I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about a little bit about our drug treatment court here in Manitoba. We actually have two now. We started off with the Winnipeg Drug Treatment Court in 2006. I won't get into a lot of the details for you because many of you are familiar with the drug treatment court process. Our first client accepted way back in 2006, graduated in December of that same year. Ours is one of the few federally funded programs in Canada at that time. And we were very, very happy when in 2015, after sort of some dispute, we opened the door and the province of Manitoba has now taken responsibility for the program. So there's been an evolution of the program, but with a sort of a brief exception, it's been 15, almost 16 years running now, and very, very excited about it. So as you can see from that slide as well, in September of 2019, we started a drug treatment court in the western part of Manitoba. Some of you out there will be harsh critics, but we call it the Westman DTC. For the record, that was not my vote. It's in the city of Brandon, which is a city of approximately 50,000 people. We'll talk about that momentarily because we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we had faced there. I always like to put this one up, especially when I'm dealing with national or international conferences, because I'm always curious about who we accept. So possession, the reality is we have very few people, we've had very few people that are simply possession charges. We've had one or two, but the reality is that's usually a plea bargain as a consequence of other charges. Obviously, many of the individuals that come into the program have possession charges, but they're usually in association with some of the other charges that you see here. Surprisingly, at least in Manitoba, the majority of our drug treatment corp participants are traffickers, low-level drug traffickers. And I think that's common across North America, that you have individuals who are indebted to drug dealers, and they go out and they sell drugs, and they're often paid. They either repay that debt. We used to, I'll give you an example, when we used to have a significant crack cocaine problem here in the city of Winnipeg, we used to see individuals that used to get paid three rocks of crack cocaine for operating the drug line for a shift. So that's really been a significant part of our focus there, and part of, there's a lot of reasons for that, both from a law enforcement perspective as well as from a treatment perspective. Clearly, though, the individuals who are involved are doing so based on, predicated solely on their addiction. Break and enter, of course, that's always a controversial one across the country and across North America. And lots of forgery and fraud as well. So just a sort of a general makeup, but to be honest with you, going through it, I would guess that probably 70% right now of our individuals in the court are traffickers. Going to go really quickly through the eligibility piece. Just a nice comparison for some of you who are familiar with the program. Obviously, criminal organizations is something that we stay away from. Violence or weapons. Was the offense solely motivated by profit? And again, that's that difference between individuals that are, for example, selling or trafficking because of addiction versus those who are commercially motivated. We also look at things like near a schoolyard, the involvement of an individual under the age of 18, and a number of other factors. Immigration continues to be an issue that we struggle with just because of the law here in Manitoba and, of course, in Canada with respect to deportation. And of course, we also look at any other serious criminal charges, whether federal or provincial. Part of the criteria for this, I should tell you as well, is that we have significant concerns, not only about the public interest, but also because we're concerned as well about the other participants and the staff, and ensuring that their safety is paramount for us. We want to create a safe environment and an environment where treatment can take place in a manner that is not going to cause concerns for personal safety for any of the participants or for our staff. Eligibility, number of different criteria. I'm just going to go through a couple of them here very quickly, just again for comparison purposes. Really our ideal candidate, and I can tell you, I actually ran this program for over 10 years before my current job, and we're really focused on individuals who, and what I've always said is that the ideal candidate, and this will come as no surprise, is a person that, but for their addiction, would not be part of the criminal justice system. That's the ideal candidate. I'd like to think that we had a few of those, but we certainly had a number of people that the reality is that, but for their addiction, they certainly wouldn't be in the trouble that they got themselves into. And I think probably all of you out there can relate to that. Presenting as motivated and willing to commit to the case plan developed for them. We actually have a very rigorous program in Winnipeg, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And willing to engage in all aspects of the drug treatment court programming. So we have a hierarchy of needs. I'm going to just skip through this one very quickly. All of you out there, I'm sure, are going to be familiar with this hierarchy of needs. Starting at the very bottom, safe housing. Massive challenge for us, both in Winnipeg and in Brandon, for very different reasons. And I'm sure, and I'll just talk about for a second, because I certainly am not going to sit and talk to a group of treatment court professionals about what this hierarchy looks like. This is the hierarchy we use in Manitoba. I think it's fairly standard for the most part across most treatment providers across North America. So we've seen two really interesting things. In 2012, we actually had a housing project where we had funding, we had a house. So we would take individuals who didn't otherwise have access to safe housing and put them into that house. You know, there's the usual drama. I'm not saying it would have been a great reality TV show, but we had a few things here and there happen. But for the most part, it was an incredibly successful program. And so as you might imagine, we did an evaluation and everybody was in agreement that it was an incredibly successful program, really met the needs of a very significant group of our target population. And we thought that it was going incredibly well. Our evaluation numbers looked a little bit different as a consequence. Things are going great. And as sometimes happens when things are successful, the funding was cut. So we lost our house, but housing continues to be a problem for us. So we're dealing with two different issues. So in Winnipeg, which is a city of approximately 700 or 750,000 people, the largest metropolitan area in Manitoba, we are seeing that there has been a significant cost of housing, like all other areas of North America, for example, and the Western world, really. We've seen that housing prices have continued to grow at a rate that's well beyond what the wage growth is. The consequence of that, of course, is that to find safe housing, we have to find affordable housing as well. And that's been an incredible challenge, because not only have we seen the rise in terms of the real estate market, which again is not unique to Winnipeg or certainly to Manitoba, but we've also seen a corresponding rise in rental rates. And so safe housing and affordable housing really have gone hand in hand in Winnipeg. In Western Manitoba, the Westman Drug Treatment Court, as we like to call it, we've seen a very different phenomenon, of course, which is that it's just hard to find housing, period. It's a little bit more affordable. As you can imagine, a city of 50,000 people, the affordability is much higher, much more attainable than it is in Winnipeg, for example, or many of the cities that you're from. However, finding housing and finding landlords that are willing to work with us has been an incredible challenge. So two very, very different processes, but as you can see from our perspective, likely not something that's new for any of you, and a very similar experiences, it would be my quick guess. I should just point out as well that in that hierarchy as Assistant Deputy Attorney General, I should point out that justice is not in that hierarchy of needs. It always bothers me on a personal note. It sort of interferes with my self-importance. But the reality, of course, is it's not. We're going to talk about that involvement in just a second. So at least in Winnipeg, our drug treatment court involves, as you can see, the regular court appearances, the random drug testing, client-centered treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy is really a staple for our program here. Counseling, life skills, employment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll come back to that one in a minute. Sadly, we have not done a significant evaluation since 2015. But just to give you a brief sense, and again, I'm not trying to compare our program to others, but I personally always find it interesting when I have the chance to learn about other programs. About 30 years of age, give or take, is our average age range. Our number that we're concerned about is that only 46% are Indigenous. And as you've heard, when we are in a situation where we think almost twice that number within the criminal justice system are Indigenous, we are very concerned about getting that number higher. And to talk to you about that in terms of challenges coming forward, it has increased significantly, but once we hit that 50% number, it sort of has evened out. Most are single and unemployed, which is not necessarily surprising. Education, grade 11 or more, actually surprising number that we have a number of high school graduates now. And again, you'll just see there that in this case, 58% of people who the main charge is drug trafficking. So just a bit of a brief profile for those of you who are dealing with drug treatment courts in your jurisdictions. Continuing again, 81% of participants have a criminal history. 31% have a record of violence. Those are very, very minor areas of violence. Just so you know, sort of our ideal candidate here is a high risk at the social level and a low risk at the violence level, because again, we're concerned about the other participants. Interestingly, in 2015, I remember those days, the primary drug of choice is cocaine. Just so we're clear, I don't remember this personally, but I remember profile of the clients. Methamphetamine. And so I'm just going to tell you just very quickly, because I always find this fascinating as well as we go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'm very, very happy to tell you that up to this point, we have not had a significant problem with opioids in Manitoba. We had a very brief time in 2019 or so where opioids had become more important in the drug scene and had become, I won't say the drug of choice, but we had seen a significant increase. That's gone away. Surprisingly, for whatever reason here in Winnipeg and in the prairies, crystal methamphetamine is the #1 drug. And it's presenting a challenge for us, because what we're seeing is, and what many of you are seeing, I'm sure, is the idea of meth psychosis, that after a long period of time, individuals who are using methamphetamine are becoming more and more violent and more erratic. It's presenting an incredible challenge for us. And I know that some of you will be talking about this during the course of the day, because we have traditionally not accepted individuals with significant violence, either as a charge or on the record. However, what we're seeing, at least in Winnipeg, is these sort of random acts of violence of individuals who are in a meth-induced psychosis. And we are challenged about how we're going to deal with that and how we'll continue to deal with that. So from our perspective, we need to expand, and we need to look at that expansion based on the needs of our jurisdiction. So I don't think that's a unique challenge. I think many of you have grappled with that issue. I know in speaking to others across the country, That's a challenge that has been widely debated, and there are a variety of viewpoints on it. I'd be curious to know about the United States approach, but and I'm sure it's very locally, of course, but a significant challenge for us as we deal with the continuing use of methamphetamine. It also goes back to the issue of housing because unfortunately, I skipped over weather before when I was introducing you to Manitoba because, of course, I wanted some of you to come in and move here. But I'll tell you right now, it's minus 20 degrees Celsius this morning. And for methamphetamine, we know that there's a significant population of individuals who are homeless or at the lower end of the socioeconomic status who are using methamphetamine because, and we've actually had somebody tell us this, if I use methamphetamine, if I use meth, I keep moving, which means I stay warm and I stay alive. And you can imagine minus 25 last night. You can imagine, maybe you can't actually, I'm not sure that you ever truly could, but you can imagine what individuals who are homeless are facing in our city. It's a challenge of survival at many levels. And so when we saw methamphetamine come into our city, we saw it moving down significantly. So cocaine was more of a middle class and lower middle class drug, which I'm sure is true in many jurisdictions. With methamphetamine, we've seen that being pushed down the socioeconomic ladder. So as we've started to treat people for methamphetamine use, that housing piece becomes that much more important because our target group has shifted ever so slightly as a consequence of that. I won't go over this for a long time, but you can see that meth-involved clients really started to spike around 2016. As I say, around 2019, that number went down. We had a little bit of shift towards opioids. Don't know why it didn't really catch on in Winnipeg. So fortunate that it did not. But now methamphetamine would probably be, my guess is probably 80% of our participants right now. Proof that it works. We always like to brag about this. At the time, we had 94 clients that were graduated. Only 32% actually made it through the program. Interesting number, I think. 10.6% recidivism rate. And of course, your numbers generally across the country are quite different, but I can tell you that in Manitoba, 67% of individuals who are incarcerated provincially, which means that they've received 2 years less a day or less. 67% of those individuals were reincarcerated within a 2-year period. And the number for the federal incarceration rate was pretty similar. Probation was 28%. So a significant decline from the recidivism rate. From the justice perspective, we of course look at that as being a very, very successful program. And that number is actually lower now. Now, just so you know, our numbers are actually a little bit smaller right now. We are trying to move those numbers up. At one point, we had 40 participants. Right now, we're down to 22 participants. In Western Manitoba, it's only 8 participants. So it's a very small number that we're dealing with here. And it's a challenge for us because in Winnipeg, at least, our waiting list is 3 times that number. So I think that's likely true for many of you throughout the jurisdictions that you're from. But Drug Treatment Court continues to be a massive success here in Manitoba. And we've been very, very pleased to be part of that, of the Drug Treatment Court phenomenon. Moving forward, I'm going to just tell you that sort of the 3 pieces that we've learned from Drug Treatment Court that we think are so important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our challenges going forward. And I hope in doing so, you can understand that we are grappling with many of the same issues in Manitoba that you are. And that we recognize that in order to be successful, to deal with the individuals in a manner that's fair and consistent, we have to be transformative in our thinking from a justice perspective. And we are absolutely committed to that. So let me start by saying that the 3 principles that we've always looked at, the 3 sort of traits that we've looked at for Drug Treatment Court are as follows. Number 1, we expect clients to buy in. And you say, oh, that sounds bad, and that sounds like a lot of things. That's true. But I always say you don't wash a rental car, right? So anybody out there right now, if anyone's ever rented a car and washed it, you put up your hand for me, please. I've never washed a rental car. And the truth of the matter is we want people to own their recovery. We want people to understand that the program can work for them and that the people who are involved in the program care about them and want to ensure that they're being successful. Second thing that we always talk about is this. We know when someone's going to graduate. In fact, we used to be able to call it, and what that was this. When a participant invests as much in themselves as we're investing in them, we know they're going to be successful. And that's that shift to being, to going from being a passive participant to being an active participant in your recovery. I'm certain that's a universal truth. And the third thing that we always talk about in Manitoba, at least, is we call it the rung principle. We get people from all rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. We've had homeless people. We talked to you a little bit about that. We've had multimillionaires who have been falling down a path of addiction. And what our position is always the same, which is wherever you come to us on that rung, from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, whatever that may be, we want you to be one rung higher. We want you to show us that you are taking the steps towards bettering your life, and that we can work with you for that goal. So those are the three sort of general things that we often think about. Moving forward in Manitoba, I can tell you this, I'm very, very happy to be a part of the Department of Justice, where we are committed to drug treatment courts. We're actually looking at expansion of the drug treatment court program. We have 2 now in our province, and we're looking at 2 more. One actually is more likely to be a wellness court. We're looking at that in northern Manitoba, where there's a significant Indigenous population. We also have a mental health court here in the state of Winnipeg, which again remains very small. Right now it has 14 active participants. And we're also looking at a number of other options with respect to community justice options. Now, I see that my time is almost up, but I will tell you that, at least from Manitoba's perspective, our focus on reconciliation, I can tell you, has been very, very well supported at the political level, and continues to be very, very strongly supported among all the departments. So working from an interdepartmental perspective, we're looking beyond our justice model, looking to partner with families and health agencies in our province, and working very, very hard to find other ways to deliver meaningful treatment to individuals, especially those in remote communities. And I know that one of the things on your agenda today will be Indigenous courts. We are looking at some Indigenous courtrooms, but more importantly, in Manitoba, we're looking at systemic change that will address reconciliation for all individuals and all Manitobans. And as we do that going forward, what we find is that in remote communities, what's very, very important is for us to be able to find supports from a community justice perspective to ensure that we can support elders and community needs, especially in smaller centers and smaller facilities, and continue to work together to achieve more steps towards reconciliation. Without question, we have a long way to go. And in a province where almost a quarter of our population are Indigenous, it's clear that our focus needs to be on healing. As much as from a justice perspective, we emphasize community safety and the importance of community safety and individuals feeling safe in their community, we have also embraced as one of our tenets here in Manitoba that healthy community and healed communities are an important part. And so as we've gone through the last summer, we've dealt with the discovery of unmarked graves and the terrible tragedies that were part of the residential school legacy. We have continued in Manitoba to commit to a justice program that is transformative, that is focused on treatment, and is focused on healed communities. So many of the lessons that we've learned from drug treatment court, from mental health court, are going to be applied more broadly in the justice system. We are working very hard with our what we call in Manitoba the rights holder organizations, which includes the Manitoba Métis Federation, as well as 3 significant Indigenous political groups, and working with them to ensure that the delivery of justice is done in a manner that's consistent and appropriate for the cultural needs and the social needs of all of our population. So I see that I'm out of time. I'd like to take a special moment to thank Justice Barnes and the members of the committee for inviting us. It's my pleasure to appear on behalf of the province of Manitoba, as well as the many, many members of the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals. And I do hope that you'll share with us our goal of moving forward to a justice system that understands that many of the solutions aren't found in the justice system. So thank you to all of you for your work, for your continued involvement, and of course, I can tell you from my own experience, for your passion and dedication to the cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Akerstream. We do actually have one question in the Q&A box, and I'll pose that question to you. The question is, have you ever had issues attracting women into your program, with childcare often being cited as a challenge?
Great question. We haven't had a challenge with that. We've actually worked very closely with Child and Family Services in Manitoba. And we've actually, I'm very proud to tell you that we've had 7 clean babies born in the program, which is a great thing. And we've had a number of successful graduates. We're pretty close to 50-50 right now for female participation. And I can tell you that we invariably work with Child and Family Services to reunite families in Manitoba. In fact, it's one of our priorities here.
That's a pretty high percentage. Thank you very much for your time and for your keynote address.